thank you for coming here tonight. We really appreciate your support. We know you have options in town, so we're really grateful you chose the Denver Art Museum tonight. And I'm really thrilled about this lecture tonight by Renée. I wish I could be in Italian. I wish I could claim the Modigliani for my department. But my department goes up to 1900, so this, I think, is 1918, so just slipped by. But welcome, I'm Angelica Dani. I'm the chief curator and the curator of European art before 1900. So Modigliani, no. But major artist, and this is really a fascinating story. I want to tell you a little bit about tonight. So we'll hear Renée and her work, and then as usual, we'll leave about 10 to 15 minutes at the end for questions. Also, welcome to people online. I tend to forget. So we're probably going to first address questions in the audience here in the auditorium, but I will keep track of that time so that we make sure that questions from our friends online also get answered. So thank you for your patience, as depending on how many questions, it might take us a little bit. So now, without further ado, I'm delighted to introduce Renée Stokesbury, Denver Art Museum's Associate Provenance Researcher. Prior to her hire this summer, Renée served as a contracted Provenance Researcher for our European art collection since 2017. And many of you may know Renée from her prior role as Associate Museum Director at the Kirkland Museum of Fine and Decorative Art, where she served various other curatorial and administrative roles since 2011. Renée has been a frequent lecturer and participant in Provenance seminars and panels, regional museum conferences, as well as Provenance methodology lectures and training courses in collaboration with multiple universities. Her research has appeared in various publications, including the Denver Art Museum reprint for Nature as Muse catalog, where Renée really did a wonderful work in developing further the provenance of those objects, as well as an early version of the Clifford Steele catalog, Raisonné. Her education includes degrees from the University of Colorado in art history and history, where she was awarded multiple research grants for archive access related to the Monuments Men and World War II art looting. Renée also receives a Master of Humanities degree with a concentration in art law policy, focusing on military history and wartime looted art restitution issues. And of course, this is just a snippet of her wonderful background, but now you'll get to hear her wonderful work. Thank you.
All right. Good evening, everybody. So I'm going to do a little bit of a walk around this evening. We're trying a new kind of lecture format tonight, so hopefully I'm not going to trip on stage and embarrass myself or Angelica this evening. This was a lecture that I presented actually over the summer for a certification course, and so I recrafted it a little bit for a general audience. Hopefully it will not be too boring. I tried to add a little bit of entertainment value in here. We're going to take a little bit of a dive into an overview of World War II looting, look at some of the bad actors in there, and then take a little bit of a look at some of the record keeping that was left behind, as well as what were those records that I used to complete the provenance for this particular work. This work right now is in the Denver Art Museum's permanent collection. It's currently traveling. I'll talk a little bit about this at the end. So unfortunately, you can't see her, but I hope I've included enough images so that you won't forget what she looks like throughout the course of our conversation. I do want to point out Portrait de Femme has come with many names and many creation dates, so that creates a little bit of confusion when trying to do research. As well as, I just want to point out on the lower left side of this portrait, this is actually a small baby's head that you're seeing, and you're going to see a companion piece with her here in just a little bit, with a different portrait where you'll see the same sitter, but with the baby in view. So just so you know what you're looking at, that helped to be a distinguishing characteristic in this painting when I am going through archives, because she does have so many different names. So you may see a reference to a baby, and that's this little nubbin here on the left corner there. So I'm going to assume a lot of you are here because you know what provenance is. You know some of the history, but some of this might be repetitive. Hopefully, I'm not going to lose you too much, but I just want to talk a little bit about provenance. It is the record of an object's ownership history, and you really want to strive. This is especially if you're a collector or a researcher yourself. You really want to strive for clean transfer because this really eliminates a lot of questions of ownership. It really helps create trust and credibility within the institution that the works that are in the collection have been legally obtained, and that there's no further conversation that needs to happen around any claims or litigation or anything around that. So provenance is really where the history of your ownership starts. There are challenges involved with conducting provenance. A lot of it comes down to just resources, both financial and human. It takes a lot of time, which you're about to see. Archives are very, very difficult to either travel to or to access, although I will say if there is one positive that came out of the pandemic is it did allow a lot of institutions time to digitize their archives. So what's interesting is this particular painting was actually researched over the years and then was quiet for a while. And then I was given this during the pandemic, and it took about 3 years to get from beginning to end. And a lot of it is because over those 3 years, more and more archives were digitized. So those are a great resource for us as researchers. Also thinking about time, historical collecting didn't always have provenance as a priority. So, collectors back in the turn of the century, or as paintings moved along later and later, it wasn't necessarily a priority to get clean bills of sale or invoices when paintings come into a collection. So perhaps a curator from 1920 wasn't really looking at that, whereas now, 100 years later, it is a priority before we take any of these works into our collection. So looking at it with a lens of an evolution of time, of prioritizing ethical collecting versus what it might have been at one point, at a later point in time. So we're going to take a little trip back to World War I. World War II, not back that far. We're only staying within World War II here. Just a quick timeline here. 1933, we see Hitler elected to the National Socialist Party. That's where the Nazi Party is actually beginning to be formed. There are laws being passed against non-Aryan employees of the state being let go. That included state institutions, cultural institutions, colleges. So you had a lot of directors, curators, teachers, all released from their posts. Alongside with that, there is a great hatred developing toward work that is done in a modern style. Non-Aryan works that didn't depict what was the ideal for what the Nazi army decided at that time were all considered to be deemed to be degenerate. And those works started being confiscated through different museums and mainly starting out with state museums. Then we see a result of that is the Degenerate Art Exhibition in 1937. This is an art exhibition that traveled through Germany. The works were all modernist painters, and then you had some Impressionist works in there. They were hung along the wall at irregular angles. There were anti-Semitic slogans painted along the walls, and this was really to showcase the degeneracy of what modern art was depicting. I just want to show you an interesting archive here quickly. So all of the work that was in the Degenerate Art Exhibition, as well as work that wasn't in the exhibition but that was confiscated and deemed as degenerate, was kept in this log, in this inventory, and it has been digitized by the Victoria and Albert Museum in London. This is the only known complete copy of this log, and this shows all of the works that were collected throughout different institutions. You can see here there's a Modigliani painting here that was confiscated. He was very much deemed a degenerate artist, so we do have concerns about his works that were looted during this period. But I just think this is a really great archival piece of information to see. You can go through page by page and see all of the works that were confiscated, and there's a key up top that that will show you whether a work was sold at auction, whether it was traded, or whether it was destroyed, which unfortunately a lot of these degenerate works were either burned or were traded underground, never to be seen again. So this is just a great record of the works of that era that were being confiscated at that time. Excuse me. Okay. So then we get into, by 1940, we've got the ERR. My German is not good, and I don't want to offend any German speakers in here. So the ERR is the short version of what is formally a formalized looting squad of artwork. I've included some of the markings here. So any works that were looted at this time were stamped on the back. So we're going to look at the back of the Modigliani here in just a little bit. But these are marks that you never want to see as a museum worker, or as a collector, or as really as anybody in possession of these works. So this really began a systemized and very well thought out process of looting artwork, both from collectors and museums, as well as art dealers. You also had a systematic looting of library collections, culturally important materials such as Judaica, and this happened throughout all of occupied Europe. So many countries were affected through this. We're going to see a little bit more in just a minute. Here's a couple of photos of Hitler going through some of the confiscated works. A lot of these works were sold at auction at the time. So any auction catalogs between 1933 and 1945. A lot of archives have done a great job of digitizing these. Auction catalogs are a great resource to see where a lot of these looted works transferred hands or ownership between museums or collections into other hands. A lot of these collections were also kept by the Nazi army for their own personal gain, for their own use. Some of these collections were being saved for a proposed museum called the Führer Museum that Hitler had planned on building. This is a mock-up of that museum. It was to house an opera house, a couple of different visual art museums, and all of these buildings were to create this cultural center in the middle of Linz, Austria, that was supposed to be this worldwide, just magnificent center that really showcased a lot of what good art was at the time deemed by Hitler and by his army and by his art army, as I kind of call it, because there were some high-ranking officers at the time. Hermann Goering, one of them, a big art collector himself, another sort of bad actor that we keep an eye on. By 1945, there's an estimated 400 to 600,000 works that were looted. And this is fine art. This is paintings and sculpture. This is not all of the other collections that I mentioned earlier. This is not library collections. This is not culturally important objects. This is just fine art objects. The bulk of the works were stored in large caches throughout occupied Europe, in castles, in other museums, and a big place, for better or worse, of storage were salt mines. So you had huge caches of works in salt mines, which ended up being really great places to store work because it was dry, it was cool, it was sort of naturally climate controlled. So thousands and thousands of these works are found in underground salt mines right after the war as well. So again, for better or worse, the Germans were meticulous record keepers. And that is a huge help for us as researchers for immediately post-war restituting and repatriating works. And we'll look at what some of these records are. And we had to have somebody help return all these works. So this is where we get into the creation of the Monuments Men. That's the Monuments, Fine Arts, and Archives Division. They are formed in 1943 by the U.S. military, recruiting about 400 men and women from the U.S. and from other allied countries. These are mainly museum curators, administrators, architects, really folks that are coming from the visual arts field to come in, immediately become a member of the U.S. Army. You're immediately a soldier, and you are sent in to help repatriate and unwind and organize the return of these hundreds of thousands of works that have been looted. I just want to point out quickly, the Monuments Men and Women have recently changed to include the women because there were quite a few women involved here as well. And if you go to the Monuments Men Foundation, you'll see the list of all of the men and women, the countries they're involved in, and then a small biography on who these men and women were. Some of them they're all fascinating lives, so I encourage you to go visit this. And then some of these works, again, they're in large caches throughout Europe. I mean, there's at least 1,500 just throughout Germany, with thousands of works within each cache that's being found. This is a photo from the Jeu de Paume in Paris, where a lot of works that were stolen by the Nazi army were kept here at the Jeu de Paume, and then eventually this became a collecting point and a way for the Monuments Men to go through and start sorting through the works and returning them. This is another, I just want to point out this tiny, tiny soldier here, surrounded by just nothing but artwork. I mean, this is one cache of artwork found in Bavaria. This is a theft from Warsaw, Poland, and I think this just gives a good sort of overview of what one theft can yield from one institution. And I want to bring up Russia. Russia has also was the beneficiary of a lot of looted works. It's very difficult to find any information out of there. They did open their archives up in the around the 90s, but it's very difficult to communicate with them and get any information on works that are there. So when we're talking about looted work, we're really talking about really things coming out of Paris, Germany, Italy, Poland. Once we start getting into Russia, it gets a little bit more difficult to track down where those works were. And there was a great success in returning these. We've got a Rembrandt that was returned. These are all photos, photos from the National Archives. These are all military photos of Monuments Men returning objects. This is a Michelangelo sculpture here. You see Da Vinci's Lady with an Ermine being returned. This is being repatriated to Warsaw in this image here. This wonderful collection of Dürer works here in this portfolio. This is an officer in one of the salt mines where he's found another cache of works. And then, of course, decorative objects as well. Those, again, very hard to research because of the mass production of those, but decorative art objects were also a big piece of collections that were stolen in addition to fine art. So we're going to get on to our gal here, Portrait of Femme. She is the companion to this painting, Roma woman with a baby. Roma woman with a baby. She's at the National Gallery in D.C. You can see a little bit of a different style, but it's the same sitter, and again, the same subject matter. Gypsy woman holding a baby is essentially what both of these subject matters entail. And then we're going to talk a little bit about Modigliani. First of all, he's so handsome. How cute is he? Such a nice looking, good Italian, nice strong look. And so true to his nature of being a very, very suave gentleman, Italian gentleman, he was very well loved by the ladies, as I'm sure you can imagine. He moves to Paris. He's born in Italy. He moves to Paris in about 1908. And starts indulging drugs, alcohol, women, all of the great things. He gets a little over his head and unfortunately dies very young. While he's in Paris, he meets and becomes very good friends with Leopold Zoborowski, who's Polish. Both of these gentlemen are Jewish, which will come up again later. But Zoborowski ends up becoming Modigliani's main art dealer. And this is important to know because for a couple of reasons. Zoborowski is a young art dealer himself. He's also enjoys all that Paris has to offer as a young man. As being Modigliani's wingman, I'm sure that he got to really play around in Paris at that time, and there was a lot to do there. So, but we know that they have a friendship. We know that this is his art dealer. But being of the time, there's not a lot of record keeping happening. Zoborowski ends up dying also young of a heart attack, and he has gotten the bulk of Modigliani works after Modigliani passes away. After Zoborowski passes away, his brother gets the estate and sells everything off to pay his debts, and that means the collection of Modigliani works are now out into the world. We don't have stockbook records. We don't have any really very much correspondence, so it's very difficult to find more information of true passage of work from Modigliani to Zoborowski. But knowing what their friendship and their relationship is, we feel safe to assume that Modigliani works transferring from the artist himself to Zoborowski was more than likely legitimate. This is the back of that painting. One of the first things that I do when I look at a painting, when I'm researching it, if it's possible, the greatest resource is what's on the back. This can either drive a research path or it can eliminate a research path for me. We, in the business, like to call them juicy backs if they have a lot of labels on them. This one's a little dry, as you can see. There wasn't too much to show here. We've got some more modern labels on here. What's really exciting, of course, is when you see those labels coming from Paris from the 1800s. One thing I do want to note here, though, the Nazis were known for forging provenance, for forging labels, for removing labels. So one of the things that we like to look for in the back, which this is not an example of, but pencil marks, chalk marks, things that are inscribed, that are sort of carved in, anything that would indicate any kind of ownership or auction or a number. Any of those things are key pieces of information for us as launch points for our research journey. So we start unpacking our files. This is what I kind of call, what's in your toolbox. Fortunately, here at the Denver Art Museum, I have access to registrar and object files. This particular painting had some good information in their object files, but it had been quiet. Nobody had really researched this for a while. So one of the first pieces of information I see is from the object file. I see original provenance, a list of publications, and a list of exhibitions. This curatorial file was written between 77 and 80, and then it goes quiet for a while. I want to just close up on the provenance here. This is the original provenance for this painting. We see Zoborowski, which we know, this is Modigliani's dealer, so that's fine. We see that it goes to a George Bearheim. Because I know what I'm doing, this is concerning to me because this is an error. This is a misspelling error. This is not George Bearheim. This should be George Bernheim. So I just want you to keep that in mind because we're going to come back to this for a minute. The other thing that's concerning is this 1944 date. If you'll recall, we just went through 1933 to 1945 are our red flag years that we're looking for. When there's a gap in the history between those years, those are the things that we want to resolve. I don't have any ownership history prior to 1944. We see that it went to Theodore Schempp in New York. We don't know when it came to New York. We know it was before 1944. Where it went to Marion Hendry, who was a very wonderful friend to the Denver Art Museum and was a donor and gifted paintings and objects here. So we know Marion Hendry is an art collector. We're okay with her, but what's happening before 1944? Where did this work travel before that? There's also a note down here that there is now somebody named Seligman involved in this as well, that Theodore Schempp in New York thinks that this painting could have come from Seligman. There's no other material in here available until around 2013. Another Denver Art Museum curatorial assistant starts doing some research in here. I start looking through here. I see that they've taken at this point, we've got more databases available. You have looted art databases that are available. I see that this person has run this painting through to see if there's any concerns or flags, if there's any claims against it. I want to point out on here, there's American Archives. The Archives for American Art in DC now have the Jack Seligman records in their archives, but there's a question here. There's research to be done here, but are there funds to do so? Probably not. So this stays quiet for a little bit longer. And we look at the provenance that's been updated, and we still have our guy misspelled. So there's nowhere else to go. Our researcher has done what they can with this, with the information that they've been provided, not understanding that this is an incorrect spelling, and really this sort of goes cold for a while. Until 2020, I get a call from Angelica who says, "Can you do some work on this painting?" And I said, I would love to, because she's a beaut. So these are our owners that we know of. These are our issues that we're seeing. We don't have dates and we don't have documentation. And those are the main things that we want to look for. Our documentation, that's what we're after. Bills of sale, invoices, letters, anything to indicate that an object legitimately went from one owner to another. We just want proof. I feel like I want to announce my new slogan for Provenance. We're putting the proof in Provenance. So I knew Angelica would like that. Thank you. So we're going to start looking for proof down all of our research avenues. And these are the things that I'm looking for. I'm looking for those gap year dates, 33 to 45. I'm looking at who the dealers are. I'm looking at who has auction records. Did this work appear in auction catalogs of that time or any time after that? Who are the known collectors? We're looking for bills of sale, stockbook records. Again, any publications and exhibitions we're going to talk about in a minute too, because those are huge resources for us. A lot of times you'll see a work in a publication and it's got the latest, when the publication date happens, it's got the latest owner in there as well. So those are big clues for us, and we're going to see an example of how that's helpful in just a second. So I want to point out the internet is your friend, but don't trust it. I'm sure all of you who've done research papers at school were admonished early on about trusting Wikipedia and what you find online. But they can be some good launch points for you. So I tend to go right to Google, put in my artist, put in my painting title, and just see what comes up, because sometimes you get some really great gems that come up. So in finding this, I see a website here called Secret Modigliani. And the person who created this site has essentially created a digital catalog raisonné of all of Modigliani's paintings. By year, you can go through any of these paintings and get some great information. And I did reach out to the creator of this site to find out more. Unfortunately, he was not very forthcoming. So I went to see what he had for our work here. And I see multiple titles, which I don't love, because that creates another layer of research I have to find. And this right here, now who's this guy? I've got an R. Rothland from Basel, Switzerland. Switzerland is a huge red flag for us. The Swiss were known to be transit points for works going from Europe into the US or into other collections. Anything in Switzerland is going to automatically trigger a red flag for me. The year 1934, that's one of our key years. So this is problematic. There's some great bibliographies, some great exhibition history. And then I see down here, thankfully, this gentleman has cited his source. And I see that there is a footnote here that I'm going to go follow. And we're going to take that journey together in just a minute and see what that looked like. So out of that, I'm finding concerns with this owner, with these additional titles, and I want to discover what this dot tree papers means. I need to research that. Where is this, wherever these papers are? So I've got to figure out where those are too. So publications and exhibitions that I just mentioned. This is a great example of this is 1929. This is the earliest known publication of Modigliani collection, a catalog raisonné, which is really a catalog to give you an entire artist's body of work as the author knows it. So the earlier catalog raisonnés or earlier publications you can find, those are great because those are going to give you some really good information. For example, our Femme has a different title here, our Portrait de Femme. She's got a field de purple. I do see Zoborowski on here, which is great. And then, fortunately, they've included a reproduction of the image, so I know that this is our painting. So I know by early 1929, this is still in the Zoborowski collection. Then there's a 1956 reprint of the same catalog raisonné, so I pulled that as well. While this is happening, we're still in the pandemic. Loans, everything's closed. Museums are closed. Libraries are closed. To get these books, you have to do an interlibrary loan, and it takes weeks. This is research now. At this point, it's probably going on 6 to 8 months that I'm trying to dig this information up. Getting these books, some of them do come from France, some come from the UK. Many of them, of course, come here. Some of our great archives are the Frick Collection and the Getty. East and West, we've got some wonderful catalog collections of auction catalogs, catalog raisonnés. So we're just getting them wherever we can get them at this point. So we finally get a copy of this 1956 reprint. There's our painting. Now she's got another name. Acol Marin, which is her sailor collar. So that means I have to keep this title in mind because this is another title I have to search for this painting under when we start going through more archives. We do see that, again, this is attributed to being in the Zoborowski collection, but I've got to take note of this new title now. We also discovered there's some new archived exhibition photos at MoMA. This work was actually in an exhibition in 1951 that went from Cleveland to the Museum of Modern Art. So we've got some great in situ photos from that exhibition. You can see her with her companion here. And then here in Cleveland. So this is just another resource avenue for us to prove she was in the States in 1951. We go back to the exhibition catalog for this exhibition. All of the catalogs say on loan from Marion Hendry, so we know that she's in Marion Hendry's at that time, in her collection at that time. So this is just some clarifying information for us. But we've got too many titles for our girl here. She's just creating more work with all of these different titles, and these titles are coming up in different publications. They're coming up in different auction catalogs. They're coming up in different catalog raisonnés. Anything that's written about this painting has the propensity to be written about in different ways, depending on who's writing it, depending on what language it's written in. So we have to keep track of all of these different titles. The other thing I don't really mention here, she's also got 3 different creation year dates. I keep finding dates from 1917, 1918, 1919. Also not helpful. The things that we want to keep in mind, too, though, that we do look at are the signature placement and measurements. Those are 2 helpful keys of information. A lot of information will let you know painting was signed on the upper right or the lower left. Oil on canvas versus oil on panel or something. So the medium is important. All of the attributes of the physical work itself are things that you want to keep in mind, too. So we're back to our red flag here. Our owner, we've got this janky misspelling. We're missing some documentation. So we start going down into our records down this avenue that's going to help us rule out any problems. So we start with the Monuments Men Archives, which are a wellspring of information. I'm pulling this up because I think this is really interesting for those of you that go on Ancestry or that like to do genealogical research. Fold 3 is another division of Ancestry. It's the military arm of wartime records that are public access. The National Archives, both in DC and in College Park, Maryland, house the Holocaust-era asset records, which is all of the Monuments Men field reports, all of the ERR index cards. It's just a ton of information that's housed here. These have all been digitized, and this is huge. I'm just showing you this website quickly. We're not going to search through here, but it's free. I encourage all of you to take a minute if you're interested. Go through there. There's all kinds of really wonderful, exciting stuff to be found in there. This is also a big resource for me of where I find my information. So in there you find things like the ERR cards. These are intake cards of artworks that are that were created. Again, back to that meticulous record keeping. These index cards, excuse me, really help to post-war help to repatriate these works because it's showing you first, of course, your artist's name and then that he's Jewish. You need the exclamation point there to really hammer the point home. All of these index cards that are related to Jewish artists all say the same thing, Jude with an exclamation point. You've also got your materials, your measurements, your titles. One of the other things that the Nazi army was known to do is to change their titles, which is also very concerning. With our gal with so many names, we have to pay attention to what some of these titles are because they are known to also change measurements. So, it's just something else to keep in mind. We're also seeing where these collections were looted from. This Z10 that you see on the top, this inventory up here, these are codes that different collections had assigned to them by the military, by the Nazi army, so that they could keep track of what works were coming out of what collections. Again, this aided in getting the works back to their rightful owners. This is not a card related to our painting. This is just an example I wanted to show you of one of the things that are available in the MFAA records that are digitized. The other thing the monuments men did was start taking these large caches of work in conjunction with the record keeping and created large inventory lists and started to organize by artist, by collection. So I'm in there looking at any Modigliani, any portrait de femme. I'm starting out with that title. I'm running a search, and I come up with these 5 basically hits. Some I can easily eliminate. The 2 with the measurements, those are not my measurements. The one at the top, this is a striped skirt, jupe, skirt, shirt, striped skirt, shirt, sorry. See, my French is not as good either. So these create more research trails. The ones that I can't eliminate, I need to go down and make sure that these are not our painting. So now I've got some collectors' names. I need to research into there. I start pulling up some of the interrogation reports, which are really fascinating to read. And I just pulled these up because these are a good example. Again, going through a keyword search with my artist, I find that there's an interrogation report on Gustav Rocklitz, who is another bad actor, bad dealer. This interrogation report, these are the monuments men's field reports. I can see that he's got a portrait of a woman that he has been working with Hermann Goering on some of these looted works. I see that there's a date attached to this of when this dealer had it in his collection. I think some of the narrative is really interesting, so I've kind of starred some of this. This just alludes back to again, the belief throughout, the permeating belief throughout the Nazi army and throughout the German citizenry of the time that modern art is considered degenerate, and this is why they were such targets for looting, these degenerate artists of the time. And then I love this last line from our interrogator, that he's proves to be a weak and cowardly individual. He's clearly addicted to. He has an addiction to morphine. He's recommended to be turned over to the French authorities and let them deal with them. This is part of a larger report, but the pages are just really fascinating. So this is just an example of what you find within the MFA records that are digitized. Again, these records have nothing to do with our painting that we're looking at, but I had to rule it out because it had the same artist and title. So then we move on to who I know to be George Bernheim. Now, Bernheim is challenging to research, in part because his works are looted, his gallery and his personal collection are looted twice. The first time his gallery is looted, all of his stock books, correspondence, and records are all destroyed by the Nazi army. They're burned. There's no records whatsoever of anything that he dealt with. So trying to track him down is really difficult. We know some of his works went through the Jeu de Paume, which again was a collecting point. And this is, again, another wonderful website that focuses just on works that went through the Jeu de Paume. And down here, this is an inventory listing of all of those works. This is, again, another digitized resource. So I do find that Bernheim has made a claim against some works that were looted. Unfortunately, this is his actual record. Unfortunately, he's only making claims against 5 works. Come to find out, he's got nearly 250 that were looted. Because of the time, because of the loss of records, he's only able to remember a handful of them, and so he has to verbally recall artist, media titles in order to make a claim with the MFAA in order to get some of his works back. Now, we know 5 of his works went through Jeu de Paume. The MFAA worked with him, told him, look, we've got 5 of your works. We know, either where they are, we've located them. We've got 3 of them that are stamped with a big HG. That's Hermann Goering. He has taken Bernheim's collection and taken 3 of those works for himself. Those works have been found and are attempted to be repatriated back to Bernheim. In total, he's able to come up with a list of 20 works out of his over 250 that were taken that he's able to make a legitimate claim for. We still don't know if our Modigliani was one of these works that maybe he couldn't remember. But we don't see that there's a claim made for it, so I'm feeling a little bit better that there's a lack of information, which is still information. They're not listed on here. Zoborowski, again, I feel okay about. Bernheim, I've got some more red flags that I want to take a look at. We're going to look for Rothlin, who, again, this is our guy in Switzerland, 1934. We have no idea where this guy came from. So we're going to visit the Archives of American Art, where I found that footnote on the Diatri papers. I don't know. I have no idea what that is. I've never heard of that before. I start doing a general search, and it ends up that Alberto Diatri was a historian who was getting ready to prepare a large body of work around Modigliani. So he started collecting and keeping a journal of all of Modigliani's, sort of a catalog raisonné of his own keeping, and just started making entries of names of paintings, measurements, where they sold. He did a huge amount of research. This was a huge gem to find this. So there are close to 350 entries. Within this record book that he's been keeping, just this random historian. And in my secret Modigliani site that I see, we find Rothlin, we find the title, Jeune Fille, and I find it there in the stock books, right where our secret Modigliani author said it would be, although the measurements don't look great to me. And there's a collection of Rothlin. So I've got my 1,800 titles that I've got affiliated with this painting. I've got 300 and something entries that I'm going to go through page by page, and I finally, on the last page, I find La Colmarin. So I see her date of 1917. Her measurements look okay. Sometimes the measurements are off a centimeter or 2, depends on if they've been reframed or not. They're pretty close. And I see collection of Bernheim in 1929. So I know that George Bernheim has this painting in his collection at least by 1929, which is a great help. At least we can attribute a date. Probably went from Modigliani to Zoborowski, who sold it to Bernheim, who I also happen to know was a dealer who worked with Zoborowski as well, or in getting some of his paintings. So then we start looking into, back at the Archives of American Art, just happened to also hold the records for Jacques Seligman. All of the company records. These are, now at this point, these records have been digitized. There are over 330,000 images of records of correspondence and stockbook records that have to be gone through. I don't have to go to DC to go through these, but I have to sit at a computer and go through all of these different. Fortunately, there's a finding aid, which is helpful, but you still have to go through essentially virtual boxes of information to find what you're looking for. Again, it takes a lot of time to, to go through these things, but we are successful. We find a proof of consignment. This is a communication happening between Theodore Schempp and at this point, Germain Seligman, Jacques Seligman's son, has taken over the gallery. And so we see a communication talking about consignment of Modigliani's Portrait de Femme. We see a good provenance history here. And this really confirms that Schempp and Seligman were working together. And then we find Seligman's stockbook entries, which this is the mother lode. This is what you want. You've seen that it's definitely in his collection. He's got it recorded in his stockbook. He's assigned it a stockbook number. There's good bibliography. There's good provenance history in here, good descriptor. This feels great. And then we have our final communication correspondence from Schempp to Seligman discussing payment for the sale of Modigliani on consignment. So this, to me, wraps up all of those concerns. And then we find a letter between Seligman and Bernheim discussing the sale of Modigliani. So that is our final sort of check mark, our final ribbon around the package that we're looking for. There is firm proof that Bernheim was working with Seligman. He was in Paris. He was sending paintings over to New York for Seligman to sell. Schempp was a co-signer selling paintings as a third party on Seligman's behalf. So we revisit our provenance. By now, we've changed some of our assumptions. We've got some great documentation. We've ruled out that weird Rothlin, but it did yield us a wonderful connection to Bernheim by 1929. We've got wonderful documentation. We're still missing a bill of sale from Marion Hendry, though, although we're not concerned, but it would be nice. It's a nice-to-have thing. So the Denver Art Museum, again, has a wonderful collection of historical data within their registrar files. Excuse me. And we find the receipt. This is the receipt going from Marion's purchase from Schempp. We've got a clear date. We've got a clear indication of the painting that we're looking for. And now we've got a clean provenance entry throughout all of those dealers and owners. There's no red flags anymore. We've got a clean bill of transfer. We feel great about this painting. I just did a little compare and contrast. This is the original provenance that we started with back in the 70s. At the bottom is the update. I'm going to talk just very quickly about formatting because I don't want to get too in the weeds. But when you're looking at auction catalogs or catalog raisonnés or exhibition catalogs, this is the stuff in the back you're not reading. This is in the credits, this is the photo credits, this is telling you who the lenders are. But for us, this is the key. This is the mother's milk of what we want for a painting is what's on those last few pages of those catalogs. And it's sort of a language of its own. When you're looking at dealers, we tend to put them in parentheses, dealers and art collectors. So that's how you know you're looking at a professional gallery owner or somebody like that. We do put tombstone dates whenever we can find them. Birth and death dates of any owner is very important for us to help us understand how and when this painting would have traveled. For me, the two biggest punctuation points that you want to see are a period, which you don't want to see, or a semicolon. Two owners that have a period between them means there's a gap. It means you can't prove that the painting or object went from one owner to another. If you have a semicolon, that is your language of speaking to you that this is a clear transfer. So those are the two big pieces that I'm looking for in any provenance entry, is a period and a semicolon. Right now, our provenance entry has all semicolons, and that is exactly what we want. We've also included notes here so that any provenance researcher or any researcher or interested party can pull this painting up and see that we've also done our due diligence. We've done our research. We're showing you what the stock number is. We're showing you, the name of the work at the time. And then if you go visit really any museum's collection, you're going to see their online collection. This is live on the Denver Art Museum's website. Here's our painting. And you'll see the known provenance. And this speaks to our issues of transparency. This is, as a public institution, these are the things that we should be providing our audience and our fellow researchers, showing that we are working at making sure that there are no problematic issues with any of the works in our collections. All told, from beginning to end, this took me 3 years to research. I bring that up because I like to manage expectations on what research looks like, why it takes so long, why these resolutions, why things that are brought up aren't quickly resolved. I want to mention quickly, she is out on loan to the Stutz Gallery and then going to Museum Barberini, and should be back here in the fall of 2024, back here in Denver and maybe on view. I don't know. It's up to Angelica. Well, it's not up to Angelica, I guess. It's up to Modern and Contemporary. We'll work on that. So when you're in Germany, I encourage you to go visit her at these shows. And then I just wanted to also show you quickly, you can email us if you have any questions, but I encourage you to go to our provenance page because it is a wellspring of information on here too. Lori Iliff, our senior provenance researcher, she is traveling right now. This is her looking at files. She's very, very diligent. But really, I want to point out the guidelines that we follow are dictated by the American Association of Art Museum Directors and the American Alliance of Museums, and those set the standards and guidelines that we follow. You can read those collecting policies and practices that we follow. And then, of course, provenance is not just Nazi era, provenance is every era. So we've broken it down to colonialism, some archaeological context. If you want to find out more, please go in here. Of course, NAGPRA-related items have their own set of policy. Native American works are the only set of works that have government oversight around provenance. All other collections are left up to ethical guidelines. NAGPRA is a federally regulated area, so there's more information here if you want to read more about that. Here's me looking for clues. And then we've got a running list of works that have been repatriated here from this institution. There's more information here if you'd like to find it, as well as some provenance updates. And you can read more about Lori and I and Ariana Flory, our curatorial assistant at large. You can read more about our team. And then we have another lecture that Lori will be providing in April over the repatriations that the Denver Art Museum has conducted over the last several years. So I encourage you to come back and come see Lori speak about that as well. So that's kind of all I have. I think that was hopefully sort of understandable, not too dry, and somewhat entertaining. We're going to leave it for some Q&A if anybody has some questions. And yeah. Oh, thank you. Thank you. Thank you very much. So
thank you, Renée.
Thank you, Angelica.
Fascinating, and of course, we really need researcher such as Renée, such as Lori. It's a very specific type of research, as you can tell. And in fact, the more you do, I know if any, in the future, if Renée comes across another Modigliani, now she will know the Datri archive, and she would. So you really build, as you do this type of research, you build a knowledge that is really invaluable, and that shorten that time. What took now, because you had not, I think, come across a Modigliani in your research, you've done plenty Impressionist, but that was, I think, the first Modigliani. So this is really a practice where what now took 3 years, if other Modigliani comes your way, she will be able, because of the knowledge that she built, to access and to know where to go look for quicker. So it really helps to have this type of work done through the years. But I know there was a hand. Oh, and sort of just a reminder for our virtual attendees. So we're going to cover first the question in the audience here, but then we'll make sure that we answer the question that comes remotely as well.
So you did a lot of work on this one painting, and I think of all of the paintings that the Denver Art Museum owns. Does all of that work, is that behind all of the paintings that the Denver Art Museum, I mean, have you had to find or somebody have to find the provenance and all of these works of art? And if so, I'm assuming yes, but if so, do they all take this long, or was that a particularly difficult one?
Angelica, well, so I'm still new here, so I'm still being careful about what we say. Angelica, I'll just kind of speak quickly, unless you had something you wanted to say about that.
No, I just would like to. It's a great question, and actually, what you hint at is every artwork is unique. So what Renée has shown is probably a methodology that we apply to all our objects, but the process and the results are different based on the era of the object and based on the circumstances. Every provenance look different, right? So what she had gaps during the Nazi era, which is concerning, and that's always a focus for, I would say in particular, European art that was in continental Europe, as England was never invaded. That's not a if a work is in England in 1935, I'm not terribly concerned. If it's in continental Europe, yes, because that was countries that were occupied by Nazi regime. And so where that gap falls is important, where the object was during those years. And then what information you have. We may have an object, an Impressionist, they also consider degenerate, but we may have information for the gap. And so overall, it's not going to take as long in general. And I would say it's not as long because Nazi era, as Renée showed, is one of the 4 areas of focus. I mean, you can, if you have, I deal with old masters from Italy, right? If I have to build a provenance from 1460, yes, it's going to take me a long time. But you're more concerned about the Nazi era. That's your first choice of years to research. Then you can continue and you can learn more. But if I'm able, personally, if I do the research as curatorial, also is part of it, provenance research is part of our curatorial practice. If I am able to sort of comfort myself of any doubts for those areas, I probably, like this was showing, put this object apart and move on to another one that has a gap in the Nazi era. Ideally, we would build the provenance from the date of creation to nowadays, but we have to prioritize, and so we go for those problematic areas, depending on the type of object that is. So to your answer, it really depends on the objects, but for European art, which is during the Nazi, which is the focus of tonight, those crucial years after 1932 and before 1946, to make sure that people really look at the 1st of January 1933, those are the ones we want to cover as a priority. That really is important.
Thanks, Angelica.
No, thank you. And sorry,
very elegantly put.
And you and you wanted to add anything because you and Renée did a lot of work. Actually, as I was saying, this was her first Modigliani, but she really helped in the European art before 1900. The Impressionists are always the one in the news, right? Because of the value, because of the prominence, because of maybe the names that are more recognized. But there actually are a fraction of what was looted during the Nazi era. And so she, however, did wonderful research on our Nature as Muse catalog that had a lot of our Impressionists. But, and continue also to other object called masters were also favored by the Nazi. And so those are also requiring. And we do a lot of work. We do a preliminary research, generally that's your starting point. And then you outline red flags. And you look at the red flags are those for European art, Nazi era, and that will be your point of departure into go deeper. Yep. Anybody that decided that this is a career they want to develop? I would say it's fascinating, and I think, I don't know, Renée, I'd love to know your input on this. The research, provenance researcher I come across, if you've decided to become a provenance researcher, you are really passionate about this research. It's really something that it's your life mission. And once people try to do provenance research, I find most often that either they love it or they hate it.
Yeah.
Because as Renée said, one thing that was really interesting and so true, you have to be sort of satisfied where sometimes no result is a result. But it's not in everyone's personality, right? Sometimes some people just thrive in more sort of short-term satisfaction, or, they want to have actual tangible result. But spending hours and hours going through and getting also nauseous. I remember the fish that goes down like this. I once made that mistake where at some point I thought it's like, seasick. So going through all of this, you may find nothing, but that is a positive research because you can rule out and it's a result, but it's not in everybody's personality. And so you want to talk, you really are you're on the group that loves it, obviously.
I mean, it's in the blood. It's a level of tenacity that I think you have to have, a level of patience. And really just being open to gleaning more knowledge and to being open to more knowledge. Every project, every object has created another new learning opportunity for me too, to find where new archives are, to find out more about an artist I may not have known about. The historical element of it is the other thing I'm passionate about, not just military history or world history, but the art history of the art market at the time too. Also fascinating.
Any question, Paulina, online?
Yes, we do have 2 questions online. First of which, did Edgar Hanley have anything to do with this Modigliani painting? He and his wife Tula donated several artworks to the dam. I remember seeing an attribution at the dam gallery to the Hanleys.
The Hanleys were not part of this particular painting, although they were very generous donors of other works, but this is not a Tula Hanley donation. This is a Marion Hendry gift. As I'm starting to learn who all of our donors are, again, another great learning opportunity. So, yeah.
Thanks. And then the second question is, do you collaborate with conservation to know more about the provenance?
Absolutely. The backs of those paintings, I'm not just yanking them off the wall and taking the backings off.
Tries.
If I'm in a hurry, maybe. A lot of those backings are, they're big pieces of coroplast. They're screwed on, they're glued in, they're taped in, and conservation understands the importance of us getting going in there and digging in and seeing what's in the back. And so we really need that team to be the one to handle the artwork, take it out of storage, and to remove the backings for us. These are pieces that I'm sure it's no secret. These are very high in value. I don't want to be the one touching them. I just want to look at them and research them. So I leave that up to the teams that are professionals. So yeah, we work very closely with conservation. Yes.
So sorry, if there was an answer to your first question, I missed it. Does every article in the Denver Art Museum have this history of provenance?
Not everything. So I would like to remind, we have over 70,000 objects in our collection. And so it's methodically going through. And we have in most cases, I would say, we have, obviously we know where it come from. That's also part of the ownership history. But in terms of how extended a provenance, I'll encourage you to go visit our online collection, which is a selection of our collection. We started a few years ago when we launched the website. We started with 100 highlights from each department. We're now at 10% of the collection, so you have about 7,000 objects online, and you can see there. You land on objects that have like this, a big paragraph, and you'll end up on some that has smaller. But the reason we are routinely adding objects after there's curatorial curators that review the content, so artists, the titles, and all of that material, and then we reviewed all the provenance, and then we post the object, and it is a way for us to also make sure that people out there, there's research that we can all do, but there might always be somebody that has an information that there's no way we could learn on our own. I remember you showed photographs of an exhibition, but I can tell you how useful are black and white photos of a relative that has a snapshot of a house in 1950 in US, and you say, that's the painting. And how many times those pictures, those personal family records can actually help either confirm or rule out a posting. So we want our audiences and our visitors to be able to see this object because they might have that information. But we need to put out information that has been vetted, and so please go visit often. We add it constantly. But no, to answer your question, it's a work in progress, and it's going to be ongoing, I would say, forever.
Plenty of job security here.
Yeah, that's what I was saying. If anybody wants to start a career, there's need.
I do want to mention we are now a growing team of 2 of this collection. And you saw how long, 3 years to research one work. Now I'm working on some other works here and there throughout that time. But, maybe at the most I can work on is 5 objects at a time with different research threads. This is not a fast churn and burn kind of situation. This is a really in-depth, you're being careful, you're documenting, you're recording. I mean, it's just a very, very tedious methodology that goes into completing a provenance. I'm certainly thrilled to be here at this institution, at a institution who recognized the need to have a department dedicated to provenance research. But again, this is a very, very slow work. So maybe someday they will all have provenance. But for now, I'm happy to have one that's completed
and it's
in 3 years.
And it's a collaborative work, as this, as I mentioned, is part of our curatorial practice. So all curators, curatorial assistant, with the assistance of dedicated provenance researcher. They all collaborate, so they're all invested in finding our curatorial assistant in European art, always look into the history, and then, the provenance researcher that are working on other objects may just review, give tips. So it's a very collegial work. We share the same goal, which is learning as much as we can about these collections. But yeah, there is the permanent collection, and then there's the new acquisitions. So that provenance also has to be vetted. And so it's a fascinating work, but we have, I feel, like a great team right now to carry it forward. Any other final question?
So you can reach me at the Provenance @ email if you have any questions. I'm sorry, I just saw your hand go up as I was. Well, we could do one more question.
I have tons of questions, but
Please email. Yes, I'm happy to.
the amount of art that the Nazis looted is incredible. Surely, where all that stuff came from was not found. So, what did they do with the stuff they do? They don't know where it came from. Where is all the stuff they can't return?
So of the 400,000 to 600,000 estimated, there's an estimated 100,000 left out in the world. That's everywhere. Institutions, private collections, they could be anywhere.
So people just took it?
Sure, some people took it. Some people, you see it in military families that came back from overseas. There's works in those collections. They're kind of just spread all over, and this is international. This is across the world. I mean, there's been works that have been found in Asia. They've traveled. The Pacific Theater was a very, that's its own story. We could do a whole lecture just on the Pacific Theater of World War II and works that were traded or sold, at vastly reduced prices. And that's a whole other area. So some of those works, they're called orphan works, where you can't find an owner. The Monuments Men was disbanded, I think in early 50s. I can't remember the exact date, maybe 51. And so they were done. They were done with they did all of the returning of the works that they could do. And so the rest of those are, the bulk of them are in museums, which is why it's so important that museums do conduct provenance on these particular, for Nazi era focus, on these particular works. So. Donna, you're in the 11th hour.
This is kind of silly, but somehow my imagination is telling me that there's been a documentary made about the Monument Men.
Yes, and thank you, Donna, for that wonderful plug. I'll mention a few things. I highly recommend the documentary, The Rape of Europa. It's based on the book by Lynn Nicholas, who really is the one who started all of this in the late 90s, mid-90s, of putting attention on this as an area of research, on this as an issue. And then there are, of course, some other Hollywood films that you should watch if you're into them. The Monuments Men movie with George Clooney. Just watch it for George Clooney. Woman in Gold is actually, I thought it was really well done. That's on the portrait of Adele Bloch-Bauer. The Klimt painting is now at the Neue Gallery. That was told fairly credibly. Going Back, The Train with Burt Lancaster. That's that's like one of the first movies on art looting, on how they loaded trains up and got them out of museums and into these hiding places. So there's some good general resources out there that are a little more entertaining in scope.
Also, I think the book, The Hair with the Amber Eyes.
Yeah.
We had the lecture here a few years ago. That's also an interesting story about the particular collection of the one of the branch of the Rothschild family.
Yeah, there's some great information out there. Use Google as your friend, put in a few keywords, and you're going to come up with, there's so much written about this topic. So I just want a very quick housekeeping. The museum's open till 9. Galleries are open till 9. The shop is open till 9. It's the last day of the member holiday sale, 20% off or more on your purchases. If you're a member, go visit the shop. If you're new, go see a new gallery. And I want to thank everybody here in person and my friends online for joining us this evening. It means so much that you took the time out of your day to come listen to what I had to say. I hope that you enjoyed your time here tonight. So thank you.